Thank you for joining us for part two of this wide reaching conversation with Jermaine E from HeirLight. Let's get back into the conversation.
I'm infatuated with the story of your mother and how, when we originally spoke, we kind of talked about the ephemerality of life and how your company that you've been building gave you more precious moments with your mother prior to the end. So I would just love to hear about that and hear about why it is so important for people to have these conversations that are difficult and scary um, now, because when it's too late, when it's gone, it's gone. You can never get these moments back. So I think your company is really creating something special.
Yeah, so the company started about a year ago, and it started from a spark of a conversation. So my parents and I, we have designed this life to live and work next to each other. So we have a co-working space in Pasadena in California where my parents worked on their businesses in one room, and if you go across the hallway, it's a co-working space, so there's a bunch of other businesses nearby. My office is right there. And so we get to do this thing where we would see each other at the office and then we would go grab lunch together. And then after that, we would go to the gym together. And for the days that I am in LA or in the country, we'd spend so much time together. And it's the biggest blessing. So at one of these lunches that we had, we went to a Thai spot right down the street that we typically go to. And I asked them about retirement. They were 60 and 61 at the time. And I said, what do you think about retirement? I want to travel more with you guys. Like maybe it's time to work a little bit less, right? You probably have already made the last dollar you ever spent in your lifetime. And what I realize is what a lot of people have, which is this silent anxiety of what if I run out of money before I die? I think this is a very, very human thing to have. And it's not that we don't have the tools to find the answers, is that we avoid this conversation altogether. And it's just easier to keep working and keep saving money and keep putting, our money into the S&P 500 and thinking about the compound. Like that's all great, but we don't really think of what does what does this investment account look like in real life in practical form, right? And so I built this fun little chatbot for my mom, and the reason why, the chatbot works is because she can reply this chatbot in any language she desires, and I'm able to like translate everything. And the chatbot did something very simple. It just asked her, like, is there like something that you want to keep to give your daughter when she gets married, for example. So then it prompts my mom to think about this question, and then she thinks about the things she have and the stories that attach to that. And she starts talking about her bucket list and her travels and memories, the songs that she liked when she was young, right? And 4 months later, I realized that if I had your assets, the things that are important to you, and I have the relationships that are important to you, I can make a legal document for you. I can make a will for you. And so that's how HeirLight started. We transform this idea of this conversational agent into a tool that organizes your information for you into a legally binding will.
That's that's really cool. I used to back when I was getting started in financial services, I worked with an estate planner, and I used to help to take the intake forms. And something that I always noticed is that I thought I was really good at like getting a lot of the information out about what's going on, what do you want. But sometimes we'd move in and talk with the senior estate planner, and they'd be able to get so much more information of things that the person was afraid to talk about, what didn't tell me, didn't reveal to me, even though I asked the question. Do you think that people are more willing to speak to an AI chatbot than they are to like a human being, or just because of the fear of maybe being judged is substantially less when you're talking to a chatbot?
Yeah, when I started this tool, I thought that the barrier of entry of estate planning was resources. And boy, was I wrong. We have users who are in their late 50s. By definition, their job, a doctor, for example, they can definitely afford a lawyer. And you know what? They should definitely have a trust. But the
Yeah.
fact that they're using my app to make a will blows my mind a little bit. And I always wonder why. So I'll put this out there. Like, if you know the difference between a will and a trust, or if you know what a probate is, you should probably talk to a lawyer. You're a little bit more advanced than the average American, who I built this app for. I think the idea is that people put this conversation off partially because it's not urgent and it's not top of mind, right? And then when it is, it's typically when somebody's getting a new house, a new child, they switch jobs, someone around them got sick or passed away. Typically, when there's a life change, is when people think about this topic. But what I realize is the older someone gets, the less willing they are to admit to someone that they don't know what an executor is, for example. I do hope that with the app, our emphasis on user design and user experience helps somebody put the guard down and just tinker with their phone, right? And be able to get all this information. If all I do is fill the information gap for someone to go from 0 to 1 and they say they want to go to a lawyer after, that's fine by me, right? I don't need to hit my metrics because I'm not venture capital backed. I am myself backed. So the entire company, we're not tied to any certain metrics that we need to hit just to get user growth, which is the beautiful part, because after we figure out all 50 states of probate code, I'm going to move into a way to verify earned income credit, so that if someone is on the earned income tax credit, I can actually just give HeirLight to them for free. Because ultimately, my goal is to help someone who was my mother 30 years ago to be able to take care of something that is so important, resource constraint or not. I think there is a version out there that fits everybody.
Could you tell me, and maybe tell the audience as well, like, what are the costs of avoiding this conversation? Because I think most people, when they hear the word probate, estate plan, trust, will, they don't know what any of that stuff means, and they're like, "Well, it'll handle itself eventually," without really thinking that they're not the ones who's going to have to handle it. It's their loved ones that have to go through this ordeal. So what is the real cost of avoiding talking about it or thinking about it?
Yeah, there's an emotional side and there's a legal side of it, right? If somebody passes without a will, and let's say they're fairly young and they don't have a lot, the bank accounts and things like that, they'll go through a process. Their family will have to go through a process called a probate, and then the probate judge, it's like a court. The judge will decide who is the next of kin, so the person who gets to inherit whatever you have. And that process can be quick, can be slow. It depends. In California, it takes forever. And I want to be clear, even if you have a will, you still have to go through a probate process, which is why many people should get a trust. Um, Again, talk to a lawyer because circumstances are different. So what I realize is this: when we're building this app, I deeply believe that many of the people that are using my app should get a trust. However, there is no way I can convince them that they're spending $179 in my app to draft a legal document or to create a legal document, that they're going to now pay $2,000-$3,000 to get a trust. I can't force them to do anything they don't want to do, even though we do put out there and say, hey, here are some common reasons why someone gets a trust, right? There's nothing I can do. And I really wish they read it and do what's best for themselves, right? On the emotional side of it, even for myself, who's very prepared for my mom's sudden death in some ways, like we had a trust set up, we knew exactly how everything should go. It was still emotionally overwhelming to, at the end of her life, have to go through, well, she had a bit more complication because she passed away overseas. So then nobody tells you this, but you have to go to the consulate and apply for this document that is a proof of a American citizen who passed away overseas, and you get to get that document back to your bank. And I mean, the process, nobody teaches us these things, right? And so I think the emotional cost is super high. But if you're listening to this and you're young, you're thinking, well, I'm probably not going to die anytime soon, so why should I care, right? There's this actress in Florida who, her and her husband knew about what they wanted, but they never put it on a legal document. There's this document out there called the Healthcare Directive. Some states call it the Advanced Healthcare Directive. Some states call it the Living Will. There's a few, but essentially what it does is it says who gets to decide what to do with my body while I'm alive if I can't make the decision. So maybe we don't think about this often, but this actress in Florida, she had gotten into a coma from let's say a biking accident. I can't actually remember what it was. Her and her husband have talked about this a million times, which is if any one of them would be in a vegetative state in a coma, they wanted to be let go. They didn't want to keep going just the sake of being alive. But this actress didn't tell her parents that. So her parents fought her husband in court for 6 years to keep her alive in a vegetative state in coma, totally unconscious until she passed naturally 6 years later. And that emotional toll that she ended up putting her loved one through, and to basically destroy the relationship of her husband and her parents, the people that she probably loved the most. It's just so not worth it. It's just such an easy document to get done, and also gets you thinking about, who do you want to be making these decisions for you?
Why do you think of it such an easy decision that people would rather work harder, earn more, stay busy, avoid the conversation than to sit in the uncomfortability of having this clarifying conversation, or at least just sitting there like really meditating on it and thinking about it?
This is something that our startup is trying to solve. I always tell people my competitors are not the other tools. In fact, the other tools lifts up the conversation for all of us. I look at all the brands out there who are doing this as folks who are kind of running alongside me, and we're trying to elevate this conversation for everybody. First, the awareness, and second, the how to. Why do people not do it? I think society generally feels that this is a difficult conversation, a heavy one, and a complicated or expensive one, when it doesn't always have to be. And most of it subconsciously is like right behind us thinking, oh, I'll get to it when whatever milestone comes, right? And myself included, right? Until I dug deeper into this topic, I also thought the same. A lot of our bank accounts have beneficiaries, and because I don't own any property, my 401k at Charles Schwab would just pass on to my sister, right? Everything is pretty easy. But what I realized is just that this conversation beyond the estate planning document has liberated a lot of feelings I have towards end of life and also what matters. And at the very least, it's opened up a conversation with my parents to take a trip to Oklahoma. And HeirLight's mission, even though we are an estate planning app, our mission is to help people live with more clarity, because we believe that clarity is love in practical form.
It's beautiful. I feel like I do the same thing when it comes to financial planning. I think so many people, and it's probably the same thing in estate planning. They feel like, all right, I got my estate plan, I got my financial plan, I have my booklet, and this is it. Like, this is what I paid for. But in reality, like, what you paid for was the conversation. What you paid for was that feeling that you said of clarity, of understanding, and knowing that you're living on the right side of where you want to be. Now, earlier on, we spoke a little bit about legacy, and that's something that comes up a lot when I speak with my people when it comes to finances. Something I hear more and more is I want to create generational wealth. I want to do this. I want to do that. Uh, Especially with a lot of the baby boomers, it's like I want to be focused on my legacy. And I guess while I have you, something I really want to ask is, after losing your mother, did you have like a different understanding of what legacy meant beyond just finances? Because you mentioned your mom passed away as a millionaire, but it doesn't seem to me like that's the thing you're focused on. It's focused much more on not the money, it's focused on who she was as a person. So what did that kind of teach you?
Yeah, I went through all the stages of grief as you know a psychologist would say. And in the beginning, it was the unfairness of why do bad things happen to good people, right? Why at 61 she was taken away from me. And in my search of that, the answers that I found the most comforting has been kind of a mix of the Buddhist and the Stoic, which is things happen just because they happen. And our need to find an answer for it is what's causing us so much pain. And I think I kind of look at the way she lived her life. She grew up more traditionally, in a different generation. There are certainly things that she valued. I'm very lucky for an Asian family. I was not forced to be a doctor, or an engineer like many have been. She supported all our dreams, and with this whole conversation of legacy, I just feel more and more sure that we just got to take life a little bit less seriously. This idea that we have to preserve what we made in this lifetime and to keep it going forever, I think comes from a place that is so individualistic. The only time I feel that, preserving wealth for the purpose of legacy is going to make your life better is when it's at service to others or in service to others. Not to say that you got to give all your money away. I think, sure, that's one way to do it. I do actually have friends who have given a lot of their money away and feel completely dissatisfied. They feel that it's just a line item, right? It's just a number in, number out kind of thing. Like, I have a friend who gives away his yield and save the principal because he doesn't have to make more money. And yet it's so unfulfilling to think about life that way for him because he didn't really get to enjoy what makes life kind of cool, which is when you do give, when you do help in service of others, whether it's in a religious context or just volunteering or using your skills to like help others and giving your time to help others. I think that human to human interaction is what makes life the most worth it, right? I actually have a really interesting side story that I picked up recently.
Please.
Have you heard of the book Predictably Irrational?
I have not.
So it's by this guy named Dan Ariely. I believe he's Portuguese. So he studies human behaviors, and the book is about how humans are predictably irrational, right? Like, if we look at a price point of, pay 200 now or pay 250 later, these things, it's like we
Yeah.
are so predictably irrational. But the story I want to share is actually about his co-founder. I think her name's Kristen, and I heard this offhanded. So apparently, when she made money for the first time in her life, instead of doing what a lot of people do, which is you get a bigger house, you move to a gated community, you get personalized services, in some ways you isolate yourself from your community. She bought a few units of homes in a place that she likes, and she rented it out or sold it to her friends under market value so that she can have her friends in close proximity to her. Because as a social scientist, she knew that the number one indicator of life's fulfillment is the proximity to people that you love. And so going back to that legacy question, we were taught that money is like a measuring stick of how successful we are, the legacy we live behind and all these things. But I think there's a shift in the conversation that's coming because we're also siloed into our comfort. And the shift that's coming may push us out to rethink how do we spend our time that we have here. And that is my goal now. It's like if one day I can afford to, I would like to buy a big apartment complex, have a very nice gym in there, maybe a big jacuzzi, and just rent it out to all my friends for basically nothing, so that I can just be surrounded with this ecosystem of love that I want to have.
That sounds like a fun life. You you said that there's something that's coming that's going to change this. What do you kind of foresee will be that nexus point?
Well, I think you touched on it, right? Our bodies are thousands of years old. It's not developed the same pace as technology. We're constantly getting stimulated with all the information. On the one hand, it's beautiful that our ability to do things so much faster and to learn something so much faster is probably satisfying to some. But on the other hand, I don't think our brains are ready for this bombardment of information. To be able to tell what is a deep fake video now, it's pretty difficult, right? And I feel like I'm very tech forward and I'm in this all day, and I still sometimes cannot tell what is real. And I think the shift, as we're seeing this, and we can see it in the younger generation, in Gen Z and Gen Alpha, that the religious participation has gone up, right? More people in the younger age are more religious now than the millennial generation, which I'm in. There's a really strange, to me, strange phenomenon. Again, that's a very personal judgment where smoking cigarettes is coming back.
Yeah.
And you think you go through this millennial generation where health is such a high priority, and now smoking cigarettes is seen as a cool social offline from the phone experience that people are doing.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to go back to a time that was simpler, a time where we felt connected.
Yeah, and I'm really curious how things are going to play out because yes, AI is going to displace a lot of jobs, and how will the world pivot again, as we always do? And history kind of rhymes a little bit. We always find a way out of it. But I'm really curious the distribution of time spent being productive and making money, and the distribution of time spent enjoying your life. How's that going to change with AI and all the disruption that's coming?
I wonder, there's something about that in myself, and what I find from doing a lot of coaching is there's so many people who feel like if I'm not being productive, then what was the point? Like, what was the point of this day if I didn't make progress? And I've been listening to a lot of Alan Watts recently, and one of the things he talks about was sometimes the point of living is just to live. Like, just the mere purpose of your existence is just to exist. And if you're going around constantly, I have to be productive, I have to be doing this, then no matter what you're doing, you're always anchoring it against what else you could be doing to be more productive, and you're never actually living.
That is my
It,
Achilles heel. That
yeah,
is something
I
I'm
think we might
really,
be the
really
same.
bad at. Yeah. I have a
How do
European
how do
girlfriend.
you explain it?
Yeah, so I have a European girlfriend, and she has taught me how to slow down and love life and live life a little bit more. In fact, she even taught me how to love myself a little bit more. I think there's a big part of growing up as an outsider, trying to be mainstream. I went to USC. I was definitely not the coolest kid there. In fact, I was definitely part of the subculture of nerds trying to build a startup while in university. And yeah, my whole life, even till today, is anchored to productivity. I get very antsy, that I'm not doing something over the weekend. And I know we were talking about this a little bit before, of how I look forward to Monday, precisely for the reason of I want to just get something done. I think the big shift for me though is that I used to spend so much time doing things to feel productive, whereas now, I try to let the hustler in me lay to rest and think more in systems and what is important. I think that's the big shift for me, which is I'm trying to not brute force everything in my life based on just straight hard work. I used to do like cold calling and cold emailing. I still enjoy it sometimes because I love the numbers game. But in order for me to become this leader that I am today, which is thinking more in process and in systems, that grit mentality person had to chill out a little bit, right? It has to like not constantly be saying numbers, put out more, put out more, put out more, and to focus on what matters more.
Why do you think so many people confuse being productive, making more with their purpose?
Because it's easier. It's easier to grind on this hedonic treadmill, right? That we keep going. It's just endless. And I have one friend who was born into a trust fund, and he's the most depressed person I know. And I remember having this conversation with him one day, and I said, "Hey, have you thought about just helping people out and mentoring and guiding them?" And he's like, "I tried so many things. He has tried so many things, and I do believe him because I see him doing things out there. But he told me something that gave an insight to how he was thinking, which is he told me based on the amount of money in his endowment, in his trust fund, it is better that he stays in bed and do nothing because the money grows faster than anything that he could have been doing. If he steps
Yeah.
out of his home and do anything, he's actually spending down the money. So it is more productive for him to let it be so that the money then goes into a nonprofit that actually helps a lot more people than whatever that he could have been doing. And
So
I never
he's
fully
lost the
understood.
purpose. Like,
It is the purpose. It is the purpose that's missing. And I can't say that I know what that feels like, but that was the closest for me to understand someone's mind like that and to have a little bit more empathy. And I know it's hard to have empathy for someone who has unlimited money, basically. But you know, the I think the pain is very deep and it's real.
my goal for all of last year, all of 25, was to figure out this like magical word of enough. What is enough? And I feel like after a whole year of trying to figure it out, I'm maybe slightly closer to figuring it out. But we talked a lot about in this conversation today about death, about are the time when we're not going to be here anymore, and being sure that we have a strong legacy. I fear that so many people, we fear these conversations. We fear talking about it because at the end of the day, we're not going to be here anymore, and we're going to have to ask ourselves, did I do enough? So I think that so many people wrap themselves in this veil of productivity, of quantifiable metrics, like how much money do I have, all out of the fear of like, when I'm gone, was it worth it? Like, did I leave a lasting impression?
When I
And I
first
guess I
moved
just,
to
uh,
Oh, sorry.
no,
Go for it.
please, 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 you got it.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first moved to Mexico, I was learning Spanish for the first time, and I had a proper teacher. Like she teaches formal Spanish, and one day she taught me the word happy. And in Spanish, there's two words that they use for happy. One is feliz, which is the one that we hear like Merry Christmas, like
Feliz
Happy
Navidad.
Christmas, Feliz Navidad. And the second one, which we don't use, is contento, which directly translates to content. I think as we're talking about enough, I think a lot about content. It, it's not that I'm happier these days. I think it's more that I'm content. It's like, if this is all that life is, this is exactly where I need to be in the journey that I'm on right now. And if you ever look at, anything in developing countries, where my family's from, it's in Malaysia. Maybe the Asian culture is still a little bit materialistic, but if you start looking in Latin America, people are happy. And when I say happy, I think they are definitely more contento than they are feliz, even though there's both. And I think that comes from this matching of expectation of life and outcomes of life. And I think in the United States, we expect so much more, not because we need so much more, but because that's what everything around us tells us to expect. Expect to have a legacy, expect to keep building. Every day I wake up, I refresh HeirLight's user account and I expect to grow, right? And if I'm not growing, I'm dying. That's what we've been taught in this country. But I find it so beautiful that there's a substantial amount of this world. I think most of Africa is like this too, and most of Asia is like this, where contento is what they strive for,
Yeah.
not feliz, not the chase of the happiness. And I think that is so beautiful.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it was the Stoic philosopher Seneca that once said, "Being poor isn't about having less; it's about wanting more." And sometimes in just being able to sit with what you have and be happy. I've the beginning of this or last year, my wife and I traveled to Kenya for the first time, and we got to meet the African people, and we got to go to the Masai Mara and like meet these people that are like truly like from it, like where you got to think like there are lions and like they're there, and when I was there, I was like, wow, these people are better than us. Like they're better than Americans. They're just so happy and kind. And it made me think back to you mentioned Buddhism and Stoicism, and those are my big practices in Taoism. In that, whenever we strive for something, we strive for happiness. The counterbalance is always there as well. Like every time that you push for happiness, the pendulum will swing eventually. All it takes is something to drop it off or to go back down to sadness. But when you go for peace, when you go for content, there really isn't an opposite. I guess there's unpeace, but that's not even really a word. So maybe we need to start to strive for these things that can never really be attained. Like maybe that's the goal. I think everyone's trying to get to the finish line when in truth, there is no finish line until we meet our end. And even at that point, we don't know what happens.
Mm-hmm. So my partner is from Ukraine, and obviously in the last 4 years now, her country's getting invaded by a neighbor. Very unjust, very unfair. And as we're speaking right now, it's winter time, and the power grid is out, and they don't have heating, and it's very cold there, and people are just in the dark all the time. And I find myself being so angry at how unfair it is. And I've visited a few times, and the first trip I went to Kiev, I just recall so clearly that I asked her, "Wow, people are dressed really nice here," and she told me it's in our culture to dress nice all the time, but since the full-scale invasion happened, people don't save their best diamonds for special occasions because every day is a special occasion for them. Like the fact that, yeah, missiles were ringing in the sky every day, and the fact that you're waking up and going to dinner, you're going to dress the best. You're just going to enjoy it. And partially where I am with my life right now is because I'm with her, and she's like a reminder of all my champagne problems that I have. But at the same time, try to not diminish the challenges that I'm going through, the loss of a mother and things like that. But it's still just perspective. And I think part of why I wanted to go on more podcasts and started discussing these topics is because even for myself, who is so aware of this, I need reminders in different formats and different forms and different stories, different voices. And I think what you're doing, for your audience and what you're putting out there is so great because maybe what we're saying is not so new, but this message may click with one person when they need it. And I think that's the magic of it all. And that's the only thing we can do, right? Is to share these stories so that hopefully it inspires someone in the moment that they need it to take that one conversation with their family.
I really hope so. If someone hears this and they want to have some clarity instead of confusion, where do you think they should start today?
So they can start by taking a piece of paper and write down 3 questions that I ask myself all the time. In extreme detail, what are you grateful for? When I say extreme detail, we're not talking about the weather. We're not talking about uh, your parents or whatever. Just write in extreme details. The tacos I had this morning or last night that had great salsa. Just write it down. Get yourself in that mood. And the second thing is to ask yourself, what's frustrating right now, right? And write it all down because you're going to gain some clarity of what is subconsciously in your mind. And then the third question is, what are you looking forward to? I think that's such an important question because what sometimes we realize is that we're looking forward to very simple things that makes us happy. It's not always like the big milestone, right? It's typically something very simple because that maps out what brings you joy. And then if you like to start thinking about a legal document, of course you can go to HeirLight.com. But even if you don't do that, start writing down the people, the names. Just close your eyes, and start thinking who makes you feel warmth and positivity in your life. When you start writing them down, this journal practice is so fun. Sometimes people do this meditation and they give like love into the universe and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of doing that in a very simple way. I'm just asking you to think about the people that brings a smile to your face. Yeah, and then you can start from there. And as you go down this journey, you realize perhaps I want to have a conversation with them. Perhaps I want to memorialize some of these things onto a journal or maybe a legal document. And there are tools out there. Mine is just one of the many.
And through your life and through what we've discussed, it sounds to me like you've worked a lot across a lot of industries. You've met a lot of different people from different parts of life. What patterns have you seen that people use to define success? And what do you think they should have defined success against?
I'm very lucky that I joined the Rotary Club when I was 23. So Rotary is this 130-year-old organization. Um, it used to be businessmen and civic leaders in your town who's doing good for your town. But as the organization aged up, it's now mostly older people. And when I say lucky is because when I was 23, I was in a room full of older people who's lived their entire life. And the perspective that you get from talking to someone older, you can hear the I wish I did questions. I wish I did statements. And I think the concept that I want to kind of leave with the audience in this question is that it isn't that life is short or time flies, it's that we forget a lot of it. And, sometimes we see our friends and it's very casual that we say, oh, I haven't seen you since a year. Time flew by, well, time flies. And I challenge the listeners to rethink that statement a little bit, even as you're saying it. Because the truth is, every day we wake up and we show up to deal with everything that is in life. We sometimes struggle, we sometimes thrive, we laugh, we cry, and there's so much life that is happening, but we forget a lot of it. Right? And we sometimes look back and just put a blanket statement over how time kind of flies by. So being more intentional about how you spend your time, as you're going through and looking at your calendar, you know, circle the things that made you happy, that made you feel good, and maybe do more of that. I think that's a really simple task that people can do. So with the older people and the successful people that I've talked to, it all comes down to the shift of stop using money to measure, but instead to use money as a tool, to use it to unlock happiness, unlock the trips that you want to go on, and sometimes unlock happiness in yourself by, helping someone on the street, on the stranger that you've never met, because that joy that you get from it is just invaluable. It's priceless. That's something my mom did really well. She used to just in LA, there's a lot of homeless folks, and we walk by, and I just walk past and go straight to where I need to go. But my mom would, walk by someone, walk back to her car, pull out some notes, and go ahead and have a short conversation with them. And since her passing, my girlfriend and I would sometimes walk by people, and she would look at me, and I would look at her, and we're thinking the same thing. My mom would have stopped, and then we would just, go out of our way a little bit and just leave that person slightly better than when we walk by them. I think it's like little things like that. So when I talk to all these successful people, I think it comes down to those things.
I think something that I hear a lot, and I feel it internally as well, is that we use money as an excuse for why I can't do things for other people. I can't do it because I don't have enough money for myself. I can't take care of myself. But what you just kind of revealed in that story is that maybe you don't have the money to give to somebody, but maybe you can just give them a little bit of time, just to notice somebody, that they're there and that they exist, that you're there, is enough. It's enough to be able to help somebody.
It's also pretty selfish. You feel pretty good after.
Yeah, that's the reason you help people. It really helps you too. Jermaine, I have one final question for you before I hand over the podcast to you. How do you personally define enough right now?
Well, I have a very clear number in mind. If I want to live in LA, I'd like to have $20 million liquid in my bank account going on a S&P 500 so that I can just spend the yield. But of course, that number is pretty high, right? So you got to keep working. But I say that tongue in cheek. It's half joking, half not. Like, that is my clarity. The other clarity I have for me is that I don't want to own real estate. Like, I really dislike the feeling of having to take care of something. Even if I hired a manager to do that, I just don't like it. Like, I've had to fix things, like plumbing and things like that. I just don't want to deal with that. So that's a self-awareness that I have. And it is certainly not for everybody, because some people feel a sense of comfort knowing that they're paying into something that they own eventually. But what is enough for me is to maintain the good health that I have, is to be able to help people around me to live better. And that comes from both a advisory, giving my little brother advice recently of his job search, as well as to be able to pack up my bags and go experience something in life. One of the things that I'm working pretty hard on right now is my partner and I, my girlfriend and I, we want to see as much of the world as possible that is difficult to do when you have young kids. So last year we went to India and Nepal because it's not very stroller friendly, right? And we're going to try to go to like Carnival in Brazil and things like that. So we're trying to do all of these things while building HeirLight without bankrupting myself. So I think the enough is the ability to just keep doing that.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to give you a chance to shout out yourself, everything that you need so the audience can find you. And of course, if you send that to me, I'll put it in the links down below for our audience.
So if you're listening to this and you would like to check out HeirLight.com, please check out the link below, but it's HeirLight.com/en because English. And it's also a hint that we're trying to roll out Spanish eventually. HeirLight.com/en/podcasts, and you'll get 50% off your first year subscription by coming through this channel.
Thank you for that. Where could people come to find you directly? Do you have a Twitter or anything like that, or is it really just through HeirLight?
Yeah, I am Jermaine E everywhere. Actually, it's my last name. In the Chinese culture, we write our last name first. So it's E Jermaine. So I'm E Jermaine everywhere. And if you look online, you'll find that I have a lot of hobbies. I ate 1,000 tacos and documented it on Instagram. I've traveled all over the world and done a lot of random things. So, connect with me on any of those topics. I do spend a lot of my time giving back. So I've done humanitarian trips. I've kind of been out to like Colombia, in a place where outside of Medellin where no tourist would go, to build up a school there to help people. So I love things like that. And if any of this is resonating with you, either the tacos or the humanitarian, feel free to reach out.
Well, Jermaine, I'm so thankful that we connected and that you got to come on the podcast. It was, I think, having this conversation today was actually something that selfishly I needed as well. You put a lot into perspective for me, so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and for coming on and being so forthcoming with your story to our audience. It's just been such a pleasure, and I hope we get to keep in touch, even off the pod.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.